Welcome, thanks so much everybody for coming. We may have a few more people trickling in. Actually, maybe in just a moment once we get started, Maddie or Taylor, if one of you is able to pull that door closed just so we have a little more quiet. Welcome, thank you all for coming to Science Stories Science Cafe. My name is Thomas Neufer. I'm a PhD candidate in organismic and evolutionary biology at UMass Amherst. I'm going to be emceeing tonight's cafe. I'll introduce Science Stories, I'll introduce the event a little bit, and then I'll introduce our speakers and we'll get started. So Science Stories is a graduate student-run science communication organization that's been operating at UMass Amherst since 2011. Previously, it was two separate organizations, Science Cafe and the That's Life Science blog. We've now merged together under one name, Science Stories. So we both host these live public events where we interview scientists about their work and other scientific topics and give you all the chance to ask questions of scientists. We also run this blog, That's Life Science, where graduate students write short and engaging articles on a variety of scientific topics. There are some sheets scattered around the room if you'd like to check out the blog or sign up to receive those. So at these science cafes, for this event, we've got a panel of speakers. We'll go through a couple little vignettes of questions that we've put together, and then in between each of those, we'll have a chance for you all to ask questions. For today, I'll mention thank you to our funding sources, the UMass Graduate Student Senate and the UMass Graduate School. The webinar is going to be recorded and posted online after the event. It usually takes us about a week or so to get it up. The recording is just of us up here, so you all will not be in the recording, though your voices will if you ask a question. If you need to step out of the room for any reason, there's restrooms across the hall. Please feel free, but this door kind of slams shut a little bit, so please close it gently as you leave because we do have folks listening in on Zoom. And at the end of the event, we'll share our website again, as well as a way to sign up for our event listserv if you haven't yet, and also to sign up to receive those blog posts that I mentioned earlier. So I'll get into our discussion and introduce our panelists. Today we're going to be talking about the role of AI, artificial intelligence, in science. What is it? What is it used for? What are the pros and cons? And we have today two scientists who are working at UMass, Alejandro Heuck and Forrest Bowlick. Alejandro is an associate professor in the biochemistry and molecular biology department. Dr. Heuck is a biochemist exploring bacterial pathogenesis. I'll let these two introduce themselves as well in just a moment. And Forrest is a geographer, wears a few hats at UMass. He heads up the MS Geography GIST, which is, what does that stand for?
Geographic Information Science and Technology.
Great, the graduate program for that. He's also a lecturer in environmental conservation and the geosciences. And so I'll let both of you speak on your experience with AI, but we wanted to, rather than sort of bringing in maybe particular specialists in artificial intelligence, kind of get a view from researchers in other fields who are running into these technologies, using them or not using them, and learn more about that. So, to get started, I'll ask each of you, and Alejandro, we can start with you. If you could just give us a really quick, 30-second elevator pitch. What is your field of work, and what's the work that you do?
Right, so I work in, as you mentioned, in bacterial pathogens, and we are trying to understand how these pathogens work in order to create new medicines or new therapies to cure disease caused by these pathogens.
Great, certainly an important line of work. What about you, Forrest? What's your elevator pitch?
So I work in Geographic Information Science and Technology, or GIS is the more common acronym. You'll hear about that. I'm really invested in teaching and learning in GIS, so my work is actually focused on how people learn, what it takes to learn the tools and technologies and ways of thinking that make GIS work, and then what are ways and methods that we might need to adapt and change GIS education over time to keep up with whatever the cutting edge happens to be in science and technology.
Great. So we'll talk a little bit more in a moment about how GIS intersects with the work that you both just described, but I need some context first. I really have to admit I don't know much about artificial intelligence, so I've certainly been hearing a lot about it online. Could both or either of you speak to your understanding of what is AI? What is artificial intelligence?
Go for it.
Well, and first I would like to clarify, I am not particularly an expert on computer science, on AI. I have been reading a lot. I am very motivated by AI and all that, how AI is contributing to science and to education at UMass. But we can say that AI basically is a branch of computer science that evolved to create tools that are able to execute complex tasks and follow patterns, right? That sometimes do things that a few time ago we thought that were only limited to humans, right?
Right. Great. Do you have anything you want to add to that for us?
Yeah, I think that's a great description. One of the things that as AI has become something that was, 30 years ago or so more in the, just the scary science fiction world, or you'd hear AI and think of, date yourself with your particular reference, Terminator maybe, or you could certainly go into Star Trek or other sci-fi things. AI is something that we're encountering every day, or at least the branding of AI we're encountering every day. We are able now to rely on not only the vast amount of data that we collect through sensors and tools and instruments across the world to put together into things that can be analyzed by computational systems, but we can analyze those and we can create systems to analyze those that can make, like you said, can make decisions or can be told how to make decisions or can summarize things faster than we could ever imagine being able to. So that kind of recall and speed, I think, is one of the things that's really important as we think about what AI is right now.
Yeah, and so as scientists and as researchers, a lot of our work is analyzing data, and so I hear about this sort of analytical use of AI to process and interpret data, in larger quantities or maybe faster than we can through other methods. But then I also hear about something that I hear termed generative AI sometimes, where tools like ChatGPT, can write emails or create images. Are those, as you understand them, sort of distinct technologies from each other, or are they more sort of just different implementations of the same thing?
I think that's a great question, and a really important thing for us to differentiate when we're talking about AI. There's this huge bubble of things that may or may not be AI. I think one of the more famous examples before ChatGPT came around was Watson. If you remember the supercomputer Watson playing Jeopardy and doing very, very well at Jeopardy sometimes. It famously answered a question about a U.S. city with Toronto, so it didn't quite hit on that. And perhaps Deep Blue, which was one of the chess-playing computers, could be thought of in AI in an earlier mode. So the bubble of what AI is very large and contains a lot of different things. I think it's really important, that question of differentiating when we're talking about AI. Are we talking about something that is for a specific type of analysis? Is it identifying landscapes? Is it folding proteins? All these other things that can be done. Or is it a generative AI? And generative AIs are probably the things we've all played with. I've played with them plenty of times. That are creating answers from data, and that's like a really vague way of describing all AI probably, but it's so important to differentiate what universe of AI you're talking about. And generative AI is, I think probably the most problematic and dangerous of the AIs out there.
Do you have anything that you want to add to that, Alejandro, in terms of the sort of generative, analytical, or other ways of differentiating these tools?
Well, in particular, as the name itself says, generative are those kind of AI that are able to make tools, right? To make tools, to do something, right? To generate something, like writing an email, making an image, make a video. You just give directions. I want to see a person walking in a room, of certain, and it is able to make that video, right? So it's able to create, to generate something that doesn't exist before.
Mm-hmm. So, Forrest, you mentioned, maybe some of the risks or issues with it. I think we're going to get into talking about, some of those possibilities later, but I'm curious to hear from both of you, from your understanding, what are some of the things AI can't do? What are some of the limitations that we run into? Certainly it's got a lot of capabilities, but maybe Alejandro, can you speak to that?
This is, again, what I read is, for example, that at this point it can feel, right? It recognize pattern and behave in a certain way, but not because it have feelings or it have this. I don't remember the name of the word at this point, but basically there's act like a machine, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have empathy, or it doesn't have this can simulate that based on patterns that learn, but it's far from that. And I find that, for example, at this point, with the tools that we have, it's not able to create that what doesn't exist, right? If it doesn't have the information, it can create that information. You need to first feed the tool with information, and then it's able to process a lot of data and get things that it will take you a long time to do. Right, but it is not able at this point. It's getting better, and the combination of different, what they call agents now, that it is getting there. But it's the last thing I listened to the podcast recently about the research assistant, that it basically was an AI that Google is developing, that it was able to arrive to the same hypothesis that the group of researchers did with 10 years of work in the lab, right? Yeah. Just based on analyzing the vast amount of data that is available.
Yeah, going through that data, manually or reading through a lot of text certainly takes us a long time as researchers. Do you have anything you want to add?
I think that you phrased it great. It can't feel, but it can simulate feeling. It can't think, but it can simulate thinking. And those simulations are getting better all the time. They're getting faster all the time. A lot of that is our computing is getting better and faster all the time. So, if you look at whether they're like ChatGPT logs or even some of the videos and stuff that are made, they can elicit in you, an emotional response. You can look at an AI video and go, oh, that's, and then you have a feeling attached to that. And so it's creating something, but it's doing that on the basis of everything it's been trained on. And I know we're going to talk about this more. So it's been given, or these AI systems, these agents have been given all the research that we've ever published, or all the books, or all the art. And then we can direct it and say, make me art. And it can say, well, this is what I know art to be, so here's some art. And you might say, okay, that's cool. But, it can only do as much as it's been given. And sometimes they're given the ability to learn more, but there's still a constraint in there. So it's really fascinating how fast these generative AIs have moved along, but they're also moving fast in research and in, in specific cases. It's just the generative ones are everywhere, so they feel like they're moving really fast.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing from both of you is that one of the important limitations is that sort of data that it's trained on, right? So what's included, how much data is there. And I think that's something that's interesting to me, and we'll talk about some more later too, is that maybe whatever sort of patterns are present in the data, whether that's the patterns we're looking for or whether that's bias, maybe that'll influence what it ends up coming up with. Of course, as human researchers, we're influenced by that type of thing in the data that we take in too, or the art or the culture. Okay, so we've kind of talked a little bit about AI. I have one more question, then we'll go to some audience questions. Can both of you name just a couple of the common ways that researchers, but also just people in general that you know of, are using AI? or even some of the ways that you may be using it yourself?
Sure. The one that I use the most are these chatbots like ChatGPT, and in terms of learning and writing, and AlphaFold, the programs that were developed to predict protein folding. No, like we are going to more scientific terms now. No, like that they were able to solve problems that scientists we had been working for years trying to solve the problem that was solved by a computer, right? Because of the ability to process and generate big amount of data, but that was only possible because scientists over the past decades were accumulating a lot of data required to do this kind of analysis, right?
Yeah, I certainly play with, ChatGPT mostly as what is it up to now kind of thing. For a while, ChatGPT and some of the other chatbots of its ilk would make you really bad maps. And so never ask an AI thing to make you a map because they're horrible. Now most of them won't anymore because the maps are so bad that the creators kind of realized, oh, maybe it's not ethical to be creating these supposed representations of the planet that are so bad that they can't even be trusted for anything. So ChatGPT now, if you ask it to make it a map, will be like, I can't do that. It's like, sorry, Hal. But there's been a long tradition in GIS of using AI methods like using neural networks or using decision tree analysis, especially with satellite imagery. Satellite imagery is really fun because you can identify things on the landscape. Well, it'll take me a really long time to look at every part of the image and go tree, car, rock, that kind of thing. But as it turns out, if you can train a little system to do it and you feed it some examples, these are trees, these are houses, these are cars, then it's really good at doing it fast. So those tools have been around for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I'll say I'm also good at making bad maps, so that's something that ChatGPT and I have in common. And you mentioned some of these other terms, neural networks, machine learning is another one that I know in research, large language models. So there's a lot of sort of adjacent terminology floating around to describe maybe like what is a broader and more complex set of tools that we're kind of simplifying for the purpose of this conversation. So I want to turn it over to the audience. Taylor has a microphone, so if you want to raise your hand if you have a question for either or both of our panelists, Taylor can bring the microphone to you. We also have some folks on Zoom, so Matt, just holler if there's a question in the chat. Thanks.
So I have two questions.
Could you speak into the microphone just so the folks on Zoom can catch you? Thanks.
I have two questions. One for Forrest. You said that ChatGPT is very bad at making maps. Is it because of the ability of ChatGPT to not do it, or the data it was trained that we have about maps out there on the internet is so bad that even the training part of the AI was not on good data, that's why I can't make any maps?
I would say both to answer that, but more that if I say make me a map of Massachusetts, that is something with a distinct factual answer, but also many different permutations of what I mean by Massachusetts. Do I mean just the state? Do I mean the roads, the towns, so on and so on and so on? And so when ChatGPT structurally gets an instruction like that, it suddenly references all the things that it has that are Massachusetts, that are that it's been trained on, that have been tagged, and it tries to then output its own understanding of the synthesis of those things. And it's never really good. It'll put cities in the wrong place, or it will make strange shapes and stuff like that. One could make some kind of geospatial AI that understood that as a spatial question, accessed relevant spatial data and so forth, but spatial data is much harder than just an image. And so it's going to take, it's probably on its way, but it's going to take a long time before an AI is able to do that kind of mapping in any kind of reliable sense. So it's a problem of just the data it has, the way it's coded, the way these things work, all kind of crash together to be bad at spatial stuff.
Thank you for the answer. The second question I have is, Thomas mentioned that there was an instance where ChatGPT or some kind of generative AI was able to develop the same hypothesis that the professors took or researchers took 10 years to do it. My question is, when the generative AI, the ChatGPT, is going through the process of creating those hypotheses and referencing those papers that are already published, where does the role of intellectual property go? Like, all of these papers are intellectual properties of the professors, and we are citing them, and ChatGPT creating a hypothesis will not give references or citations to those papers or professors, while people who are working as researchers like us, we will give those citations, those references will be put in our hypothesis development. So where does the role of, I was looking at Google one time, and says, research is when you stand on the shoulder of other giants. So the role of giants is decreasing nowadays because people can use these generative AIs to create hypotheses. So what will happen to the cumulative tradition of research now?
Yeah, Alejandro, you mentioned that sort of example, so maybe that's a question you can handle a little bit. How does it? What's the sort of role of tracking that intellectual lineage?
So first I would like to clarify that it wasn't ChatGPT who did that. This is an engine that Google is developing that is not available yet, that is called Research Assistant. So something that they can make available to assist research, and is and again, when you say that ChatGPT will generate an hypothesis, but ChatGPT is not going to publish that hypothesis. Who is going to publish the hypothesis will be who is using the ChatGPT or the AI, right? And then that person will be responsible to cite the sources, right, that base that hypothesis. But yeah, I understand your point. No. When using those AI tools, those AI tools can be gathering information for the whole library, all the books in the library, right? That for you it's going to take years to read and to reference and to do an analysis. And then probably if ChatGPT doesn't tell me where it got that information, right? So I would also be able in a time frame to go and look for the information and be able to say where ChatGPT got that, or where this AI tool got that information from. And we are entering the topic of the ethics and at what point a person had to be regulating or supervising the task that the AI is doing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that stands out to me in your answer there is differentiating some of these maybe more controlled environments of particular tools, like the one you mentioned created, I think you said by Google, or, yeah,
right.
So that's kind of a controlled iteration where with a certain data set being fed in versus maybe using an existing, signing on to, OpenAI and using a publicly available sort of instance of those tools that they may work a little bit differently too in terms of what they're influenced by. Are there any questions on Zoom?
Yes, I have one question.
If you read it out, I can repeat it, and then we can get, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the question was if you have any clever, nifty uses of AI in science, which I think you've kind of addressed. So the other part of the question is where you hope AI would go, and where do you think it could be most helpful in the future?
Great, I'll just repeat that for the folks on Zoom. The audience member asked about any, did you say clever misuses of AI?
Unique or any clever or nifty uses?
Nifty uses of AI in science, or hopes for where AI might go.
Well, definitely it's making a big change in image analysis in medicine, for example, from what I read. So it's very good at detect patterns in the pixels of the images, right? That we are not able to distinguish, and using math and all the algorithms that are in there is able to detect that much better than a human can do. And in that term, in order to interpret and all the kind of images that you get when you go to the doctor, MRIs and
Going to say the same thing, just images of the planet. It's the same idea. It's pixels, and it's the component little cells that make up an image, and it's detecting patterns over the wealth of our satellite imagery history. And AI and these computational systems are very good at detecting patterns and sifting through. You could have probably the resolution of medical imagery might be just as good as the resolution of a satellite image, looking at different scales. But the idea of finding patterns is so. I think that's an area where I actually am very excited and have minimal ethical reservations about letting an AI loose on that stuff. I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, so it seems like huge potential for maybe detecting, diagnosing problems at the scale of protein, person, planet, whatever. Great. And was there another question in the audience? And then we'll move on to some more questions from us. Yeah.
I've written down a couple of questions, so there might be more than one. So I apologize in advance because I actually don't know how many questions I wrote down. But going back to regulation and finding ways to manage AI, what have you seen as professors? What is your approach to students using AI in classes? And what do you predict the framework of AI will go into the next couple of years?
Great question.
So in principle, my approach to the appearance of AI was, I wanted the students to know how to use it as soon as possible, because I am seeing the great potential that it might have. And I don't teach literature or things they don't write. My teaching is more related to math and solving problems. So the first day of classes, so all I do is just take one of the problems, input that in ChatGPT and show how ChatGPT can answer the question and how it can be wrong too, right?
Yeah.
So you have the tool, you can use it, but be careful because you will need to judge if the answer is right or wrong, right? And it is not always right. And the day that they take the exam in my class, they cannot use ChatGPT, so they use a paper and a pen. So basically, so far it haven't influences my evaluation of the learning. That's why I want them to use it to learn as much as possible. But I understand that there are other areas in education that suffer more. If you need to evaluate writing, or the creation of a story, ChatGPT is much better, right? Than sometimes myself.
Yeah, in my Intro-JS class, I've got a sentence that is a challenge. It is, ChatGPT cannot complete the work in this class. You're welcome to try. And it can't. Someone who tried to do that would not do well. But that's also kind of a luxury of the spaces that I think we're both in of this, And one of the ways that we might think of ChatGPT and all these other tools is a way of offloading some of our thinking. It's a lot easier to do a math problem, especially a complex one with ChatGPT, but it's also easier to do it with a calculator or with a slide rule, or with an abacus, or with whatever system of computation you want to put together. And for me, one of the key things for education moving forward, and I think we have more questions coming up about this, is that I don't agree with the philosophy that if you use ChatGPT once, you fail my class. I don't agree with that as a philosophy, because I think that it's our job as educators to grapple with why someone would see an essay question or something like that, or like a personal reflection. Google had an ad out for a while that was using its AI, and it was like, do you need to write a heartfelt letter to your kid? Use AI to do that. I'm like, that's not the thinking. We're supposed to be offloading. So I think that we need to be challenging ourselves and students in our courses to grapple with and understand why we have to still think and feel and emote and do all of these things. And the challenge is to have that dialogue so that there's a two-way buy-in. And I think that's essential.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and this is a good transition. We'll have more time for audience questions, but this is a good transition into our next section. I'm gonna have some more specific questions for each of you about, your use of AI in your research or in your work. So that's a good transition for us for a question that I have for you. You mentioned some of these other tools, in Abacus. If you were a student of cartography many hundreds or even thousands of years ago, presumably you'd be teaching them with a gnomon and a sextant, and you'd have a big obelisk, and you'd be looking at shadows. So obviously things have changed. But are there, what are some of the core mapping or GIS skills that you think all students should have, regardless of the sort of power or potential of AI, for their future careers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we should be using more obelisks in cartography education, and sextants too. So a lot of it is about broadly spatial thinking. That's one of the core underlying parts of not only GIS but geography as well. We're thinking about spatial relationships. How are things related to other things? And so that's one of the core components that I think is essential. In the GIS space, we're working with computational cartography. There have been a lot of names over the years. It's about understanding how your system works. And of course, computer systems change over time. Software changes over time. There are different softwares, but it's about understanding how they work, how you can put data into them, analyze data with them, create products with them. And those are universal. Those are universal things. It doesn't matter what platform, what software, what data you're using. These are kind of universal things that you have to be able to address. I think that those are not going to ever go away, even if some kind of geo AI does come along where you can type in and say, oh, well, I need all this data for Massachusetts, and it pulls it down for you. That would be awesome, frankly, if you could do that. But like Alejandro was saying earlier, you still have to validate it. You still have to understand what that data is. If it gives you a reference, you still have to go back and check and say, oh, okay, this reference is good or this reference is bad. So those kind of critical awareness pieces are always going to be essential in whatever the future of GIS becomes. And you're always going to have to know how to make a good map. And a good map also changes over time, but some things like labeling features, making them pretty colors, and making them readable and understandable for your audience, that's never going to change. And that's also why ChatGPT makes bad maps, because it doesn't know what that means.
Yeah, and good map making kind of gets into more of that, creative eye sort of side of things. So Alejandro, you talked about your work and the sort of implications, for disease research. Obviously, it seems really clear to me that if we can use these tools to get treatments for serious disease 10 years sooner, that's unequivocally a good thing for human society. But then there's also a piece, I think, of using AI in research that's come up a couple times, of sort of offloading the sort of tedious or really slow tasks of research so that we can spend more of our time or more of our brain power on the parts that are more necessary to come from people or that are maybe more interesting or more fulfilling. So rather than clicking through a bunch of pixels or a bunch of images and manually classifying them. So I guess I'd ask for you, in terms of incorporating AI into your work, what are some of the tasks you would love to be able to offload and have AI move through more quickly? And what would you like to do with the extra time you'd save?
Well, basically, I would like to get AI do all the writing I have to do. So, because it's the fun part is in research is to do experiments and to get results, and then you need to sit down and write the paper, for example, or write the next grant to the. So, well, okay, this is what I think. Just write the grant, write the paper, and I can use the time to do more experiments. But this is my particular case where writing is difficult, or there are other people might enjoy writing and will hate the part of doing experiments.
I think that's right. I like writing, but if I could have a tool that managed all my little graphs and figures in ggplot, I'd press that button without a second thought. Well, I actually have a question for the audience, because I'm curious, as we're talking about these sort of professional uses, would you all just raise your hand? You can raise your hand on Zoom too. Do you use, or have you tried using any AI tools, OpenAI, ChatGPT? Some of you guys have? Yeah, okay. So anybody never used it? Okay, a couple out there too. Yeah. Cool, it's interesting to see. Yeah, one of the questions, that I have for both of you is how much you see your colleagues and your students uptaking these tools. Are people excited about them and incorporating them, or are more folks still kind of holding out and waiting to see what happens?
Yeah, that's a good, I think it's definitely everywhere, kind of maybe in the kind of writing and assistive, getting through sticky stuff like that. I am hashtag good at email, so I don't mind writing an email. I like to write an email, but I know people who need ChatGPT to, maybe needs too far, but use ChatGPT to help them, draft an email or to help them draft a list of things that maybe they need to work through. And those assistive things, I don't really mind. I think those are fine. When people start dumping, AI responses into like reflection things. When I teach the GIS course in the summer, it's all asynchronous, so we try to do more discussion-based things to replicate the classroom. And it's like, okay, watch this time lapse of the glaciers melting. How does that make you feel? And I want to know how you feel, not ChatGPT, tell me how I feel about, right? That's I don't want that. So, and I feel like that's a temptation. But yeah, I definitely see it in a lot of assistive writing. Certainly the researchers I work with are doing strange computational things, which is fun. So, but I think write me a quick email is the most common thing that I see, especially my colleagues doing.
I think that depends on your motivation, right? So when I discovered AI, for me it was a shock, right? So and I immediately jumped into YouTube videos and I started to learn and I try to get engaged students. Let's sit together and learn together because it was all new. Can we really analyze a PDF file using an AI tool? Can we really do this? Can we really do that? And the speed, how the answer that we were getting, like the speed that it was writing a letter. I mean, I just press the button where this information went and how it make it to arrive in milliseconds, right? That was shocking, because even if you're good at writing, it will take you some time to write that page. But I think that it's important that we understand, I don't know if everybody understand how AI is made or how these systems are made in terms of the data, the training, and what things. And I would like to know what things, if you use it, what things shock you about the use of AI? And I can mention a couple. I was walking in another country and suddenly was a beautiful building there and what is the name of that kind of architecture? My wife asked. And I said, well, I don't know. Let's ask ChatGPT. I took a picture and not only give me the name of the architecture. This is a building located in this country, in this place. It recognized the building just for the picture. And at that moment, I realized that everything I have in the phone, when any of these tools that you use, Instagram, have access to your pictures, immediately know everything, where you have been, where you are, what do you eat, what do you wear, because can know what clothes are you using, everything. And that was shocking. And for example, reading and looking at these videos that you can take a picture of your fridge and tell you, give me a list to go to the supermarket, what I need to cook for a week. Now, if I want to do this and this and this recipe the week, it's able to analyze what do you have in the fridge and make a list for you to go to the supermarket. That is shocking.
Yeah, so that's a great kind of I think transition into our next section also. And so, if any burning questions come up, do raise a hand or we'll keep an eye on the chat. Yeah, we'll take one question and then move into some of the next section.
So, AI is really new for me. As I come from a part of the world that we do not have electricity yet. So, but this is interesting, and my question to both the professors are, especially the professor who talked about the building. What is the consistency like in the world of like AI? If you take a picture of that building and ask ChatGPT, if I do the same thing from the other corner of the street, then the answer you get and the answer I get, will they be the same or different? And how do we see that?
Well, my answer would be, I don't know, right? It's very difficult to know, basically because I haven't done the experiment, right? And the thing changed so fast that I can do the experiment with the version of ChatGPT that I have in my phone today, and will be very different from the one that I can have in 3 months, right? So, and definitely, if we analyze the way these things work, right, that they use probability in order to provide an answer, right? So in order to create a sentence, so read the first word and analyze based on all the books I read, what is the probability that the next word is this one? And if we use 100% probability to create the sentence, it will always write the same sentence, right? That's why we let the AI a certain randomness in the answer. So say, okay, accept words with 80% probability, and that increase creativity. If you go too far, if you increase that too much, you get craziness. So you will get sentences that doesn't make any sense. There is a limit. So that's why, as you were saying, the consistency is a price that you have to pay to get some kind of creativity sometimes. And I agree that sometimes it might not be consistent because of that.
As a quick follow-up, sorry. So I have 2 boys. They think they're smarter than their father. And a few weeks ago was the first time that I saw what ChatGPT actually do. They actually put my name and asked, what do you know about this guy? Then he wrote something on his phone and he came to me, hey father, are they true? I said, what is that? It's all about you. So I was scared. Fortunately, like it was my biographies and here and there, and it was exactly right, my own writings. I said, yeah. My other boy, he also wrote my name. These 2 guys, they got 2 different things. Both were about me. Both were good things about me, luckily. And they said, which one is true? I said, both of them are true, but they're different. So, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you know, to build on to the answer of I don't know, the answer is about, well, the answer is what was it trained on? And so, like, what data went into making that version of ChatGPT and those set of answers. So there's all these different components that are feeding something that feels very simple, right? My pocket computer can get me any answer that I want to grab, but it is built on so many different chains of technology and so much different depth of information and stuff and training data and all these other things that, yeah, it's kind of overwhelming at times to think about what is really going into making just a very simple answer. And it's a lot of things that are, the simplicity of the interface betrays how complicated it is.
Yeah, and maybe a little influenced by how we prompt it too. So you had mentioned this sort of realization, like, oh my God, everything I've put on Instagram, somebody could figure out exactly everywhere I've ever been. And I think that we're going to kind of talk a little bit about some of the ethics around the use of these tools. So, you know, I think that speaks to one of the common concerns I've heard about AI, which is its implications for privacy or surveillance technology. But you'll also definitely hear worries about labor implications, whether it'll put people out of work, or intellectual property conversations that came up earlier, particularly in the arts, but in the sciences as well. and then environmental impacts. And I think there's also some concern of sort of, is this going to become sentient and take over the world? So you mentioned Terminator or some other generations. Actually, so first question is, do you have a favorite like movie AI trope? Did you say Transformers or Terminators?
Either works. Either.
Yeah, I guess right.
Either of those are fine.
Knight Rider.
Yeah.
I think that Terminator, right, or iRobots are those that, Terminator because it's the one that put ourselves now in a position that we are scared of what could have happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And way before the AI was developed, right? But again, so it put us in a position to be afraid of. I don't know if that have basis, right, to justify that could even happen. But I think that what is important when dealing with this is we can be in favor, we can be against, but what we cannot be is in not to get informed about what AI is and what AI can do. Because things are going so fast. We are being involved right, in information through all the social media. And a lot of things are happening that if we don't know what we are dealing with, we are not being able to make the right decisions, right? And let's move to politics, let's move to science, let's move to religion, to whatever field you want to go, right? I think that the important thing is what you are doing, guys, is to get the people informed and to try to get the people as much information as possible so we all of us can make the right decision given the moment.
It is funny how it takes me a lot longer to think about good AIs in fiction because there's obviously Skynet and Terminator. In Stanley Kubrick's A Space Odyssey, open the pod bay doors, Hal, and Hal says no. And that becomes a problem when the computer says no. You can think about the Borg in Star Trek as a form of AI. But, there are certainly, maybe good or beneficial representations out there. There's a great character in the Mass Effect video game series called Edie, who is an AI, who is quite fun. Yeah, so I think it's probably natural to think negatively, but I agree with everything else you said. It doesn't need to be restated. AI is here and present, and we have to know about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And folks may have other. I wish we had a little bit more time. We're running short on time to get into some of these ethical questions. I have a final question for each of you, and then we're gonna take some other questions. I guess, that point that you've made, Alejandro, inspires me to ask if there's something, and you can choose which of these you want to answer just briefly, is there something that you wish that the general public knew about AI, or something that you wish you knew about AI? Particularly thinking about some of those different ethical dimensions that I mentioned.
Yes, I think it's important to know the limitations on what AI is. I've seen in a lot of my friends and colleagues that they jump into the use of AI and it is the guru or that person that knows absolutely everything. And that's why I think that getting educated in what AI can do or cannot do, what are the limitations, is very important, because you will be influenced in a bad way if you use AI in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, building on that, I think it's vital to understand how the AI system that you're operating has obtained its data, has been built, right? Someone built it, the AIs aren't building themselves yet. But all of the information, all the data that was put into ChatGPT or Grok or Meta's AI or all those different things, someone made choices to put those things there. And oftentimes the choice is theft. And that is very problematic for how we then want to represent and build whatever comes out of these AIs. Great example recently for Meta. Meta said, we want our AI to write really well, we want it to sound really good. What if we just put all the books in it? And they're like, well, what do you mean all the books? Well, all of them. There's a pirate library out there called LibGen that has all the books. Those are pirated, they are stolen and downloaded and all that stuff. Some of them are open source. Like you can put Shakespeare in there and no one's gonna care. But a lot of it isn't. It's academic writing, it's published work. I know my writing's in there, I guarantee your writing is in there too. And Meta said, okay, we'll just use that. So if you use Meta's AI and you say, hey, can you write me an email? It's going to use its knowledge. Some of it, much of it, who knows how much, was stolen. No one was given any credit or compensation for what it's built on. The same thing goes for art. If you're using any of the systems to make an image, well, oftentimes those were just pulled off of image hosting platforms. Even forums, Reddit, DeviantArt, all these kind of things. They took them. They didn't credit the artist, they didn't credit, and maybe that's fine for, again, Van Gogh or Monet or something, right? Make me an image that looks like Monet. All right, those are public domain. We have a system to give those credits, but other times they're stolen. And so then we get into that kind of spiral of, oh, well, I just had an AI design this thing. Well, it designed it with someone's work that it stole, and you should have paid them to put the thing together. So that's, if there's one thing, it's that. We have to know where our information is coming from, and we have to make choices about going from there. If there was an AI out there that was trained entirely on Wikipedia is open source, I would have no problems with the content and say, like, cool, I want to sound like Wikipedia, that sounds fun. But many of these are not as open as those kind of.
So I'm going to ask a question. I want like a 10-second answer because I want to leave some time for audience questions. But just to make this tangible, we're sort of talking about it, personifying ChatGPT AI a little bit. But it exists in the physical world, and so some of these environmental concerns come from the sort of physical reality of AI. So where does AI live? What does it look like? And how does that relate to sort of energy and water? Super condensed, quick answer.
This allows you to connect to a gigantic rack of servers someplace on this planet that is consuming a lot of electricity and water in places that might not have the electricity and water to spare.
Okay, that was a super great condensed answer. Thanks for keeping it quick. Okay, and I have one quick question for a special guest that Matt is going to pull up on the screen, and then we're going to transition into some audience questions. So our secret invited guest is ChatGPT. So we're talking about AI. We haven't let AI be part of the conversation. We've got both of your perspectives, but I want to hear what ChatGPT thinks at these server farms somewhere. So Matt, would you ask ChatGPT what are some of the biggest risks and possibilities of using AI for science?
Biggest risks and possibilities?
Yeah.
So is this the free version?
This is the free version.
Yes.
Yeah. We're on that grad student budget, so maybe we get a better answer if we paid.
Another ethical question, right? You get better computing if you have more money.
So we have the possibilities of accelerated discovery, automated experimentation, enhanced data analysis, interdisciplinary insights, predictive modeling, accessibility and collaboration. But there are problems with bias, black box models where you can't trace back what it was thinking, reproducibility crises, over-reliance on AI, ethical and privacy concerns, inequality and access to the computing infrastructure, issues with reliability and scientific integrity. So I'm feeling proud of us because I think we touched on all of those, both pros and cons during the interview. So that's one thing that two professors can match ChatGPT at least or exceed. So we'll have some time for some more audience questions now, but just before we take these final questions, in case folks need to leave, right on the hour, I want to say again, thank you all so much for coming. Around an hour after we take these questions, we'll share some links both in the Zoom chat and some QR codes on the screen. They're also scattered around the room to again check out our website, our event listserv, and our science blog post, so you can find out more about science happening in the area. And now I want to open up the floor and the Zoom floor to any other questions we have for our panelists before we wrap up. Yeah.
presumably, with all these different AI engines out there, they all would have access to the same amount of data. And is all of the data being used, or and how do you choose? And how do you know that one has searched more data than the other?
So I believe that not, that we don't have access, we all don't have access to the same data, and that's why I ask. If you're using the free version, for example, of ChatGPT, you don't have access to the same engines and data that you might have if you're paying $20 a month, and not to the same that if you're paying $200 a month in the professional. And I imagine that at this point there might be companies out there that can pay millions of dollars to develop engines or AIs or tools that you don't have access to, that they only use, and they have access to those tools.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and so just for the the other part of that question, is there a way to know sort of what kind of data gets used to train, or is that all pretty behind closed doors?
In my experience, it takes a lot of work to dig into the mechanics and like the documentation of these different platforms to understand what they were actually have access to and what they are trained on. Now, when you get to the paid products, they will definitely tell you how to upsell and try to convince you. There's a sales pitch to it, but it's I've always found it pretty difficult to understand what exactly some of these models are trained on.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, we have a question from Zoom. So Phyllis asks, can AI be sabotaged by adding questionable information or data like RFK Jr.'s theories on vaccines? And would it be possible to use AI to purposely generate wrong scientific data like false DNA sequences?
Oh, that's a great question. So just to repeat for the folks on Zoom, we had a question about whether AI can be sabotaged intentionally or unintentionally with misinformation or disinformation. Is that something either of you are worried about or can speak to?
I think everything is possible, but in models, now you need to understand that I think models that ChatGPT I cannot sabotage because it's a closed model. They're not something that I can add. It was created, trained, and closed, and then we send information and we get an output. But there are many different forms of AI, and definitely AI can be used in social media, like by a company or by advertisement to do certain things or to shift. And that's why it's important that you learn more and more of what AI can do to guide your legislator, to put rules, because now we need to create the rules that, to be fair, that everybody have access to the same information, and the only thing is to learn what AI is doing and what things need to be done.
Yeah, there's a great old saying in computing: garbage in, garbage out. It behooves all these companies to make good models with lots of good data, and they can't be disrupted like this. But your AI is only as good as the information you put into it. If you trained it on, say, flat Earth conspiracies, your AI would tell you that the Earth is flat. And if it is actually something that has come up now that more, especially AI art, is out there. The AI art engines are getting worse because they're getting trained on AI art and they're cannibalizing themselves. Like a copy of a copy or a Xerox of a Xerox kind of situation, it eventually degrades. So, yeah, exactly. So it doesn't, so there are concerns, but, I think it would, there are plenty of other ways to be a bad actor on the internet right now.
Imagine that you have an AI that direct traffic, right? So and I pay advertisement for my restaurant that is located here in the corner, and the AI now get influence because of the pay advertisement to direct the traffic to pass in front of my restaurant.
That's what took everybody so long to get here this evening, maybe. That's what's going on out there. Yeah, and I think, Alejandro, your point there is important, that the process of sort of training the AI and the process of using the AI like we just did are a little bit separate from each other. We have time for one more question, then I'm going to let let folks go, and maybe the panelists, if they're willing, can stick around and chat afterwards as well. Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned that, 30 years of AI, but I'm going to go back almost 6 decades. I signed up for, I should say my mother signed me up for a computerized IQ test. I said, fine, and I went along with it. And occasionally made a mistake and it'd come back and try to teach me. But a question came along saying, who was the first president of the United States? G-O-R-G-E, W-A-L-L-A-C-E.
Oh.
And it came back and said, no, George Wallace is a bigot from Alabama. And I said, that's impossible that someone had pre-programmed that. It had to be a live person on the other side. So then I became very interested in programming, and I'll say by about 1973, wrote a very complicated program that would have responses from the computer saying, oh, I'm so sad that happened to you, type of thing. But, it's all pre-programmed, and and angry responses too. You're an idiot. But that was all pre-programmed. But you would have to, have played my game. I call it the game of life. Many, many times to get the exact same response.
Wow, I mean, it's a sort of an interesting question about the Turing test there, and takes us back to some of those early questions about replicating the sort of thinking processes and how we can differentiate, the machine from the real. I'm going to end us there. Thank you all so much for coming. Please, please fill out our post-event survey so we can hear from you about how we can improve for next time and what future events you'd like to see. If you're a technophobe after all this, you can fill out our paper survey, or at least our sign-in sheet over there. Also, please don't forget about us over the summer. Science Stories takes a break from hosting science cafes over the summer, not because graduate students don't work over the summer, but because actually graduate students work the most over the summer.
More over the summer.
It's a little myth. But in the meantime, we will still be publishing blog posts through That's Life Science, so you can still get your science fix, and we will be back with more live events in this area in the fall, in September. So thank you again so much for coming. Please join me in thanking Dr. Heuck and Dr. Bowlick for their insightful thoughts here. Eat more food. Feel free to hang out and mingle for a little bit. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your audience-ship.
Good work.